Hello! Good morning! Well, afternoon. Greetings, Exiles. It is a wonderful, wonderful day, and our first proper early access patch has hit, and it's a doozy of very, very, very good things, I have to say. And I won't lie, there's a little bit of vanity behind me making this video because something I suggested actually got implemented, and I'm sure lots of people suggested it, but I'm still chuffed. So here we go. First things first. When you dodge, I'm sure a lot of people already knew this, your player model shrinks and you can sometimes squeeze between enemies. They're making that even more squeezier, however you want to describe it. Your player size will be 0. If there is a gap to squeeze through, you will squeeze through it. And really, really tiny units will now also be pushed aside. That's really good because if you've played the game, especially as a melee character, getting surrounded is like the single most deadly thing that can happen, and there weren't really enough tools for evading that. But now there is. Dodge roll's probably going to handle it most of the time. I would go so far as to say probably all of the time, unless you really mess up or get incredibly unlucky, which would be unfortunate. But, you know, at the same time, while being surrounded is deadly, try to build your character to survive being surrounded for a moment so you can kill one enemy and get out. I was about to say it's not that difficult, but I understand the balance is whack, so for some people it might actually be. Anyway, this is my favorite change. Checkpoint changes. Clicking on a checkpoint will allow you to teleport to other checkpoints in the area. This is huge. If you don't know why it's huge, you probably haven't gotten very far, but the zones in Path of Exile 2 are big. That's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is when you have to backtrack. And now that you can do this, backtracking is great. And there's also going to be checkpoints at the entrances and exits of zones to really help facilitate that and let you just move around a little more easily. And they also added a checkpoint in the Dreadnought area, which I think that's Act 2. You know, spoilers. I don't want to say more than that. Towards the end, it's a penultimate zone, more or less. Possibly the most important changes, though, and the ones that are going to have people saying log in, are the item changes, the rare monster changes, the currency. All of this from here on out is like the really good stuff, because the biggest problem people were having with the game was loot, and loot is more common now. That's I don't know what else to say. Loot is going to be way more common now. This is almost kind of like in Path of Exile 1 when they would nerf something and they would nerf it 4 different ways. Well, they buffed this 4 different ways. They're all small and in different areas, but all together it's going to be very impactful. The start being that stronger rare monsters are going to drop more items, and I believe this might specifically be for endgame, because if you're playing the game through the campaign, you probably haven't run into this issue that people are having in maps where you don't always have a unique boss in a map, because map is now like a progression through an actual interface. When you get to a boss, obviously the loot's going to be pretty good because you've fought tons of unique mobs in the campaign up until that point. You know what to expect. In this, the rare mobs in maps are going to drop much more. The rarity bonus per mod they have is doubled, 10% more quant, or increased quant per, well, flat actually. It's just 10% quant per, which is huge. If you've ever scaled quantity in Path of Exile 1, you know that this makes a very big difference. You don't feel it necessarily every time instant impact, but over an hour of play, you're going to see much, much more. And also the rare monsters are going to have more modifiers, which makes them harder, but it will also mean that the loot explosions will get bigger. And considering there isn't a map boss in every map, running into the occasional big rare probably isn't going to feel frustrating the way it does in Path of Exile 1, especially because the game's pacing has changed. That said, talking about the currency is maybe the one that's really going to excite people. Regal Orbs, much more common. I actually noticed this last night. Disenchanting 6 mod rares now gives you 2 Regal Shards. So 5 6 mod rares gives you a whole Regal Orb, which that's kind of nuts. That's a quick number. Lesser Jeweler Orb drop rates increased by around 33%. I really like this change because I had 1 drop in Act 3 normal and 1 in Act 3 cruel, and those were quest drops. And last night I got my first actual Lesser Jeweler's Orb that was random. So I immediately felt that. And then the drop rate of Chaos Orbs was reduced, which is good. Chaos Orbs are a very strong currency, but they're also a very gambly currency, which I know they all are, but this one especially. This is a chance to take an item that has what you need, but not really enough, and then potentially brick the item by removing the important mods, but also potentially make it amazing by getting rid of a lackluster mod for something much better. So this is incidentally supposed to increase the drop rate of Exalted Orbs, which I trust it will. And then Gem Cutter's Prism, I guess Gem Cutter's Prisms were just like not right. This is an extreme change. 500%, that's 6 times more likely for those who took mathematics. And then Gem Cutter's Prisms now increase quality on gems by 5% instead of 1%. Mathematically, they're about 24 times more likely because the impact of a Gem Cutter's Prism was increased 5-fold as well. That's absurd. That means these basically didn't exist, and I'm really glad they did this because honestly, gem quality is a very powerful stat, and if it was a stat that was really, really hard to scale, you could potentially complete endgame like pinnacle bosses without getting your gem quality up, and that's probably not intended. I do wonder though. Well, yeah, I do wonder though, what is going to be the purpose of Gem Cutter's Prisms after people max out their quality? Because in Path of Exile 1, you have chase gems like Empower and Enlighten, but those gems that are kind of analogous to those are much easier to access now. So I'm interested in finding out how Gem Cutter's Prisms are going to affect something else, right? To keep them valuable long term, because I imagine they were made this rare because they thought, oh, once people max out their gems, they're done with these. So maybe they have something in mind. Hopefully they have something in mind, because you don't want a piece of currency to just be incredibly valuable early on in a league and then completely fall off a cliff and have zero use towards the end. There's also been some general buffs to how much benefit you get from map mods, which I don't know enough about this to talk about it. I just know that, again, this is another tap on the mapping experience being more profitable. And if you were at maps and quit because you just weren't getting enough, I think that's changed now. Now, if you're like most people who got frustrated early and had to bail because they just couldn't deal with it, we got unlucky drop protection for the early game. So act bosses and map bosses will always drop at least one rare. That's fantastic. I need to say that right now. That doesn't sound like a massive change, but for the way Path of Exile 2 works, just that little bit of guarantee is really good. And then no more than 50% of a unique monster's drops can be gold. And this is another important thing because they kind of reveal in the notes here that gold has different tiers of drops from like common to rare, etc. And people were kind of theorizing that gold drops were overwriting item drops. And I from the way they're wording it here, I don't think it's so much they're overwriting it as it is a monster gets a certain amount of drops, and some of them are assigned to gold, and some of them are assigned to items. In this case, they're going to make it so that unique monsters, so map bosses and the like, will always drop at least half of their drops as items, which is going to make that much more consistent, even to the point where maybe farming act bosses is a thing to do, because you're going to guarantee a certain amount of items dropping every time. And if you had weird name locking issues with click to move, that's probably gone. If you're having weird name locking issues with WASD keys, I find that if you go into the skills and you click the little arrow to do the detailed pane, you can check always use stationary, which is a fancy way of saying you kind of remove the targeting from the skill, so it will always just kind of follow an untargeted philosophy, and that has helped me a lot personally, because I actually like the WASD. I think it lets me be a little more dynamic with how I play, and it makes dodge rolling while fighting easier. And then at the end here, there's kind of a bit about endgame maps and how rare monsters are important in the game right now for like a majority of the loot you find, and just when you've killed enough mobs in a in an endgame map, you'll get to see them on the map. Kind of how would I put this? I cannot remember for the life of me the name of this league. Metamorph. It's like Metamorph, where it will show the mob on the map once you've killed enough in the map and help you track those down. I don't know that checkpoints are going to be in map zones because I haven't gotten there. Assuming they are, these two changes together could make life a lot better. Like a lot better. But in general, more loot, easier to get out of being surrounded, backtracking help, all the things we want to see. No proper balance changes yet, although They did nerf Summon Raging Spirits slightly, so that you it'll take 2 casts to get all 10 out every time. Fine. Fine. I'm a little bitter. I am. But I mean, fine. It's really not the biggest deal. I'll probably just slap Spell Echo. I'll probably just slap Spell Echo on Flame Wall, which hopefully that works. I actually don't know if that'll work. That might not count as per cast. So this is not a big deal in my opinion. This is very small for a build that is very well rounded and durable. So I'm not too worried about it. I'm excited. I need to get back in. I'm almost done with Act 3, so I'll be starting map soon, and when that happens, I'm probably going to start streaming again, because that's properly new content. So, have a good one, Exiles.